Welcome back. In this lesson, we'll be talking about a structure of a web page. Any modern web page, any web page in general, has a scaffolding. It has a skeleton, it has a foundation which is built on top of, which is built with HTML. HTML has evolved throughout the years and there's been many versions of it. We are now currently at the latest version, which is version 5. Version 5 makes things a little bit easier for developers to rapidly prototype and create. Now, there is a minimum requirement for making an HTML page, and it is a group of tags. What is a tag, you say? Well, a tag is simply an opening and closing section that describes what's in it, and then you have a space to actually put code or put text inside. So for example, you see here I have and this is, we're using Visual Studio Code to make this easier. All I did is I went on in a folder and I created a new file. It's called index.html. Of course, because it's called index.html, if I try to open it, it'll open in the web browser. Now this is called an absolute URL because this here is going straight into that directory and straight onto that web page, straight into that file. Now this URL here will work on my computer, but if I give you the URL, it's not going to work on your computer simply because you do not have this file located in this directory. And this is why when you host something on the internet, you're using the IP that connects to your own machine, and then from there you go down to the file that you need to host. There's also a relative directory, which we will talk about in a second when we actually get into putting something on the page. So again, if you want to open a tag, you simply add the open tag symbol. If you want to close a tag, you simply add the closing tag symbol, which is just the opening tag symbol but with a slash. So for example, if the tag for adding a paragraph to your page is P. So if I add a P, open, P, close. Now since I'm using Visual Studio Code, it automatically will detect that I'm trying to add a tag and it will close it for me. So now what this means is that I can now add a paragraph to my page, and I can do that inside the opening and closing tags. This tag is just consisting of an opening area and closing area, and then in the middle you can add your content. This here is just the element name. So here the element name is body. That represents the body, the main part of the web page. This is HTML. That just indicates that this is an HTML page in the first place. Now, other tags that are very important is doctype HTML. Doctype just tells the browser, the client, that this is an HTML page and gives the browser some information about that HTML page. Doctype used to be a very long string, and now it's shrunken down to just this in HTML5. So whenever a browser sees doctype HTML and that's it, the browser realizes that it's HTML5 and the browser can translate and interpret it accordingly. Next you have the HTML tag. The HTML tag is just the page itself. Everything that you have in your page will be inside of that HTML tag. Now if you have different pages and every page is a translation or it's written in its own language, and then you have a website that has English, Spanish, Portuguese. You can set that here, and then later you'll be able to switch between those pages easily according to the location of the client that is requesting your data. Now the head tag will include information about your web page. Part of that information is a title, which simply is what the title of your web page is. For example, if I say this is my first web page and I save and then I refresh my file here, you can see that now I have a title and it's called this is my first web page. I can also have something called the link tag, which just sets icon, the favorite icon of your HTML page. So if I refresh now, you will be able to see that now my favorite icon has updated. Now I had to add the type of image it is and the relationship, and this is all available to you via the slides, lecture slides. You will find links to W3 Schools, and it has information about all of these tags and these links. Now, the meta tag here contains information about the encoding of the page. It also can contain information about other page-related information as well, including, but not really limited to, scale information for different devices, as in you might need to know what scale to use for a mobile device or for a tablet or for a game console. It can also have information about the keywords and the description of a web page. Now, these are very important because any search engine looks for the keywords and the description of a web page, and that's how you will be able to get your page out there and be reached by search engines if you use proper SEO on them. I can have the meta tag, and I can use keywords or description which is actually by using name, keywords for example, and then what are these keywords? Let's say HTML, CSS, and let's say web stuff. So now the keywords for your page are HTML, CSS, and web stuff. Very simple. It could also be that you need the description. Name, description. And now you can actually add a description to your page. This is a simple thing. Now, I see this page is about web development, for example. And now search engines can see that this page is about web development. They can see this description. So you can see here that I've used this link tag to get this image and use it as a favorite icon from my website. So it's showing up here, and if I add favorites, it's going to show up there. So this URL right here that points exactly to where my image is. So just for clarity's sake, let's use the image tag in the body. And now let's say href. Actually, I don't need this because this is the tag. So if you do it like this, C, and then now if you're like me and you're using Visual Studio Code, you can just control space, or if you're on a Mac, command space, and it'll show you the directories. But the directories are relative to the index page. So see, I have my index page right here. So it just has the perspective of the index page. So imagine if this index page was a person, it sees what it can see. So if you control space, it'll show you files and images, because this is what's here. This is files and images. And I can go into, for example, images, and you can see what's inside of images. Download.jpg, which is right here. So now, that's all nice, but what if my file is not here? What if it's out here? Let's say I'm trying to use schedule. Well, then you have to go one layer up. From here, you have to go up. To go up, it's simply two dots and a slash. And now you're up. Now I can use schedule.jpg. If I want to go up more, add another two slashes. So you can navigate your entire machine, your entire computer, from here just to get to an image or a file that you want. So for example, if I go into there, and then I go into, I can only see schedule here, so let's just use that. And I save, always remember to save, or else you will not be able to see changes. Now refresh, you can see that now I have that image. Let's say instead I want the one images, download, and I save, and I refresh again. I have a very intellectual looking fish. This is how you navigate through relative URLs. Now, we talked about the head, we talked about relative URLs, but the main meat of your page is inside of the body, because this is what your client, what your user is seeing, and you can have anything in here that you want. Well, there are some types of elements that you will need to understand, but let's first make it easy and talk about block level elements. Basically, a block level element is an element that starts itself on a new line. So if you have some form of data on a line, it just doesn't get added to the end of it, it just starts on the new line. It starts on a new line, and it spans the width of the page as far as it can go. Of course, it doesn't matter if you're adding little or a lot of content, it'll go as much as you add, but nothing else will share its space. Nothing else would share its width. So for example, that would include divs, headers, paragraphs, and forms. So these are all elements, and there are links to describe these in W3 Schools. It's on the slides. But if you use any of these elements, it will take up the width of the screen, the width of the page. So, for example, headers. Headers are just a very good way to say, oh, this is important. This is a title. Header 1 is a very important title because this is one of the targets for search engines. Search engines look for your page's title, and they also look for the H1 because that is a good description of what this page could be about, or the main topic of this page. So generally you have 6 header levels. So it's a big title, then a smaller, then a smaller, then a smaller, and a smaller. The idea here is that the bigger the title, the broader the category, and then the smaller titles represent little categories inside of them. So the biggest one is header 1, H1, and then H2, H3. So you can have, usually you want to have one H1 and then the rest would be out of the other 5. So if you can say, welcome to my page, and I save, and you look here, and it went into its own line, and it is nice and big and in charge. Now let me say, let's say I do this and I save. Nothing really changes, even though I add a lot of spaces, because HTML doesn't care how many spaces you add. It always collapses them to 0 or 1 space. To keep that in mind, you cannot space HTML by adding more spaces. That doesn't work. So this also works for paragraphs. You have something called the paragraph tag. P is for paragraph. Most of these elements have descriptive names. So P is for paragraph. I can have a paragraph here called P1, and I save it and it shows up. And I can have another paragraph here. Let's call it P2, right? And again, but look, this time I have 2 paragraphs. Actually, let me make this more interesting and just paste this multiple times. And if I refresh, you'll see that it spans all the way to the end of the page. Then when it reaches the end of the page, it wraps and does it again. But see, this paragraph and this paragraph are separated. The reason they're separated is because these are 2 different paragraphs, and paragraphs have spacing between each other. We also have the form tag, but this will be discussed further when we get to HTML forms. We have the HR tag. The HR tag is nothing more than just a line that separates 2 different sections of your page. So if I add HR, you can see there's no closing, it's just a tag that you add, and all it does is just adds a line and separates the page. Now you have 2 sections of the page. So far, so good. But basically, all of this isn't really important, because the main parts here, that the minimum amount of tags that are required for you to have a valid HTML5 page is just these. These are the minimum amount of tags that are required for you to have an HTML5 page. So over here, the meta tag is an HTML5 exclusive. You're gonna have to have it. Well, it's not exclusive, but you have to have it in order to have an HTML5 tag. This doctype HTML directly represents an HTML5 page because it's short, and the HTML5 is the only short version of HTML. So if you go back to what we had before, again, our page is nice and very intellectually fishy. But now we can actually discuss some elements which were added to HTML5 and are exclusive to it. And these include semantic elements. Semantic elements means that they have names that are descriptive. Let's say if you add a side is just something that goes to the side of the page. Let's say a sidebar. We can have a nav, like a navigation bar. we can have an article, which is self-descriptive. It's an article. You can have a header, which is a section that goes at the top of your page. You can have a footer section that goes to the bottom of your page. Any of the modern web page design elements, and they will have names because HTML5 just tries to make things a little easier for you. So if we, for example, go to yahoo.com, if it still exists, oh, alright, they do. So you see there's a sidebar that we have here, right? There's a navigation area that we have up there. There's a header, okay, that we have here. I don't see a footer anywhere. And there's the main body of the page. Right, so it's all there. If you're on any web page, you can right click at any time and you can say view source code, and you can see the HTML for that page. Or you can click and you can do inspect, and you'll get the developer options. And on here you can actually change stuff. That change is temporary, it's just there for you to review, and it's a good way for you to actually be able to debug things. So you see, change the element in the page just fine. If I go into a specific image, say inspect, it jumps to that element. That's a blatant ripoff, but it works. Now if I refresh, those changes are gone because they're not actually in the file, they're just temporary in the client, in the browser. That concludes the structure of a web page. Again, there are a lot of links that you should look into in the slides. Any highlighted area that is blue, that's a link that will take you to a more detailed description of what that subject is. You'll find a lot of W3 School articles on there describing the different tags and how they're used and what they mean. And we will be talking and using more of these as we go on.